Yesterday, the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, was asked whether he or the SEC had plans to ban Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. And as you would expect, Gary Gensler said no. Now, this is really important because last week we saw the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell ask the same exact question. Do you have plans to ban Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies? The answer was no. So we now have the Federal Reserve Chairman saying no, they do not plan to ban Bitcoin. We also now have the SEC Chairman saying that they will not ban Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies either. Well, this is two different points here. One, they don't have the power to ban it. The SEC has no right to oversee or ban assets that are not considered securities. Also, the Federal Reserve is not in the business of banning assets or banning ownership of these types of financial products. Congress, however, does have that ability. So Congress could theoretically vote to actually ban ownership of Bitcoin in America. Now, I highly doubt that is going to happen. We have multiple Congress people who actually own Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. They understand that this is good for their constituents. There's tens of millions of Americans that own these assets. There has been hundreds of thousands of jobs, either directly or indirectly, created in this industry. There's trillions of economic value that has been created by the industry. And so if you were to come together and try to be adversarial towards these assets, it would likely lead to a massive backlash from the people. It's very hard for politicians to go against the will of the people, and the people want Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So it's great to see the SEC chairman saying this. Now, when you get regulatory clarity, it's not full clarity, but it's a step in the right direction. When you get that, all of a sudden, it gives the green light. Wall Street, institutions, individuals, large family offices, everywhere across the board, people see something bullish like that. What do? They go and they buy a little more. So it's not surprising this morning that we saw Bitcoin explode upwards over $54,000. When we look at the charts, we can see Bitcoin up over 7% this morning. Every other asset basically doesn't matter. They barely move compared to Bitcoin. There is no volatility in these other assets. You've got boomers on Wall Street who are celebrating a 0.96% move in the stock market today. Nobody cares. If you can't move with true volatility, no one who is young is going to pay attention, whether you like it or not. If we then go and we look at the Bitcoin stats themselves, we can see that Bitcoin has officially regained the status of being a $1 trillion asset. That means that the Bitcoin network, which was created and launched January 3rd, 2009, has now grown to $1 trillion in market cap. For only 12 years of existence, that is absolutely incredible. Almost 90% of the Bitcoin is in circulation. And then again, remember what I told you last week, $20 billion of on-chain settlement volume has only happened a handful of times, about 7 to 8 different times. Yesterday, in the last 24 hours, $21.6 billion of settlement volume occurred on-chain, not on the exchanges, actually on-chain. One of the biggest days, one of the top 10 days ever for Bitcoin settlement on-chain. People are using this as a medium of exchange, regardless of what the mainstream media or anybody else says. The real exchange volume, over $10 billion. Huge, huge numbers. And then yesterday, miners in the last 24 hours made almost $50 million from that Bitcoin block reward, not including transaction fees. The global revenue over the last 24 hours for Bitcoin miners was close to $50 million. The economic incentive of this system is taking over, and we are watching an absolute FOMO. You've never seen FOMO like Q4 Bitcoin bull run FOMO, and we are just entering it today. If we go ahead and we look at the actual asset compared to the S&P 500 in gold, you can see that Bitcoin is up 408% over the last year. These are video game numbers. If you go all the way back to March of 2020, we kept telling you that this was going to happen. You can't print trillions of dollars, scare investors into believing inflation is coming, and have them run for inflation hedge assets, and they happen to pile into an asset that has a fixed supply. Of course, it is going to increase in value significantly. So 400+% increase in the last 1 year. Gold down 7%. Gold has failed as an inflation hedge asset. There is not a young person who is trying to buy gold. They are dumping gold and they are buying Bitcoin or other assets. And then you have the S&P 500 up 28% over the last year. If you go all the way down to the 10-year, yes, bang, bang, over 1,000,000% increase in the Bitcoin price over the last 10 years. Literally, it's like asking a second grader, how much did it go up? And they're like, 1,000,000%. Yes, it is insane. Now, if we go ahead and we look at Bitcoin, gold, S&P 500, NASDAQ, and the treasuries, we can see them side by side. The ROI of Bitcoin, of course, check mark, it's beating everything. But the compound annual growth rate is now 158% over the last 10 years. Every year, 158% compounded for a decade is unheard of. Absolutely insane. And so no matter what statistic you look at, whether it is how many people are on the network, how many nodes are on the network, how much mining hash rate is on the network, what is the actual activity of those that are buying or selling on the network, everything is bullish. It looks like a big green light for Q4 bull run to commence. This is the second leg of the bull market. We've had this happen time and time again in bull markets. And so the history is not a predictor of the future, but damned is it rhyming. Now, of course, this doesn't go unnoticed by people on the internet. And I just had to call out the fact that Jack Dorsey, the leader of Twitter and the leader of Square, he hit us with a 1T tweet today. Well, I don't know what Jack was talking about, but it's probably not a coincidence that when it hits 1 trillion, he then tweeted 1T. And so no matter who you are, everyone really respects Jack. He's not seen as some Bitcoin Luddite on the internet, but they are all watching. It is so strong of an economic incentive to participate. And as it goes up, you take the social consensus of I have to tweet about it. Then if we look at Charlie Bolillo, have we ever decided how to say his name? Charlie Bolillo, who is fantastic on Twitter. He has Bitcoin rises to the highest level since May. It's up 88% from the low in June. If you were buying Bitcoin in June, you're up 88%. Absolutely stunning to see in a 3 or 4 month period. Then if we continue on, the young wizard Will Clemente yesterday hitting us with the long-term holder supply shock has reached all-time highs. If you remember that green bar across the top there, every time that we have entered into that long-term holder supply, reaching that green bar, what we have seen is a very, very rapid price appreciation afterwards. Again, history is not a predictor of the future, but the on-chain metric of long-term holder supply is suggesting that you should buckle up. Now, if we then go and we look, well, what are the miners doing? After a few weeks of selling, Will points out that the miners have actually started to accumulate again. And so when we look at this miner buying, you can see that price usually appreciates following the start of miner accumulation. And so every single statistic that we are looking at is showing that there is bullish tailwinds to this asset. But my favorite chart, my favorite metric that anyone has pointed out, Dylan LeClaire coming off the top rope 360 windmill dunking, saying never in the history of Bitcoin Network has this large a percentage of the circulating supply been held for over 3 months. 85% of all Bitcoin in circulation has not moved in 90 days. That is insane. The supply squeeze is definitely underway, Dylan. And so when you start to look at the fact that 85% of Bitcoin has not moved in 90 days, regardless of price appreciation, any sort of volatility, and then on top of that, the Chinese ban, 2 transactions occurred during that time period as well. It didn't shake anyone out. Bitcoin holders are here to stay. And so if demand increases going into Q4, I expect price to appreciate very, very rapidly.